I'm Shaun Davenport. I'm joined today by Rob Keegan, who is our Trade Solutions Manager, and we're going to be asking some questions today about low-value imports. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So the first question today is, can you explain what constitutes as low-value imports under EU customs regulations?
So a low-value import is anything under 150 euros in a B2C movement, sort of business-to-consumer movement.
Okay. And what key challenges come along with that?
So last year there was 4 billion of them. Mm-hmm. Next year there's projected to be over 5 billion of them. There's so many declarations that it's just impossible for EU customs authorities to review all the data. A lot of these are cleared instantaneously, and that leads to a lack of revenue collection, but also a lack of product oversight. So the EU say a lot of unsafe electrical products, for example, are entering as low-value shipments from the likes of Temu, Shein, AliExpress, etc.
Okay, thank you for that. Has the growth of e-commerce impacted low-value imports and customs operations within the EU?
Definitely. So years ago, there was nowhere near as many low-value shipments. Consumer demand has driven growth massively, and EU customs authorities just haven't been able to keep up. But then again, the system was never designed for 4 or 5 billion shipments a year.
Okay, great. And what is the purpose of the Import One Stop Shop?
So IOSS, Import One Stop Shop, is a facilitation to ease the collection of import VAT. So it existed before the low value reforms, and it'll exist afterwards. It interacts with the reforms rather than replaces it.
Great. And what impacts do low value imports have on EU businesses and the market competition?
So low value imports sort of undercut domestic production really. If I can buy something nice and cheap off Shein, it's usually because there's lower energy costs, lower labour costs, less regulations. If I'm an EU producer, I've got higher energy costs, higher labour costs, I've got more regulations to meet. So the reforms are sort of to level the playing field really, by making those imports just a tiny bit more expensive.
On the back of that then, how authorities ensuring compliance and VAT of product safety requirements?
So with low value shipments, there's so many of them, EU customs authorities just can't check every single declaration because they don't have the resources to.
Yeah.
So one of the arguments for implementing not just the €3 per commodity code flat fee for duty, but also potential handling charges that some EU member states have, is that it will give them the resources to check more of these products and put more sort of compliance resources into looking at these imports, stopping at the border, checking them, seizing them if necessary. They just didn't have the time or the money to do it before.
So in relation then to removing customs duty exemptions for low value goods, what is the potential benefits and drawbacks of that?
So the benefits are greater oversight, more resources for EU customs authorities to deal with it, a level playing field if you're an EU producer, say you make t-shirts in the EU, suddenly imports from China are a little bit more expensive and you can sort of have a fair competition against them. Now if you're a consumer, all of a sudden you've imported a parcel that contains t-shirt, shorts and a hat. That's €3 each. You've now got an extra €9 to pay on what might have been a €50 parcel. So the consumers ultimately lose out. Exporters from around the world, of course, they will lose out, and EU customs authorities will gain. You could say that the EU consumers gain as well because they get better product safety, but I'm not sure many of them will see it that way.
And how does technology play a part in that? So data analytics, technology, how does that improve monitoring and processing?
So that's really all down to the modernisation with the EU Customs Hub, which is not here yet, and the low value changes have sort of jumped ahead of it because it's such a pressing demand. But with advanced technology such as AI, etc., they'll be able to intercept more parcels that need intercepting and let sort of legitimate trade go.
Okay, and the last one for today then. So if the EU introduces new reforms for low value imports, what factors should policymakers consider to balance trade facilitation, revenue collection and consumer protection?
I think they need to look at all areas as a whole rather than saying, well, we just need an extra €3 to €5 per shipment, potentially even more for the collection. Consumers have driven this demand and there's a reason for that. They have an appetite for low value parcels. They've got to ensure that low value parcels can still flow, but at the same time funding customs authorities to check them on the way in. And then if EU producers have sort of higher costs, higher energy costs, higher labour costs, more red tape to meet, then it's only fair that sort of the exporters around the world have to meet those same sort of standards, and they can only do that by being checked. They can only fund those checks by paying an additional 3, maybe 5, maybe €6 per shipment.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
That's
I'm
all right.
sure that will help others.